Have you ever contemplated the precise reason why the monumental world map, meticulously rendered onto gazelle parchment by Piri Reis, within the damp, imposing walls of Gallipoli, during a muted spring morning in 1513, remains historically fractured? Its corresponding half, a vast cartographic representation of the Asian continent and the yet-to-be classified oceans, having vanished into the depths of antiquity. We are currently situated in an hour where the infamous, oppressive Lodos wind holds Istanbul captive, battering the dark waters of the Bosphorus and relentlessly fatiguing the branches of the centuries-old plane trees at Seraglio Point. Yet you are stepping into the most secluded, impenetrable heart of the Ottoman Empire, the privy chamber of Topkapı Palace, entirely isolated from the external meteorological chaos and the exhaustive howl of the storm. This is no ordinary physical space. It is a profound capital of absolute stillness, a monolithic sanctuary where time itself decelerates along its own axis, grinding to an almost imperceptible halt. Upon your initial step across the threshold, the natural, dignified atmospheric chill, preserved for centuries by the massive stone masonry, greets your presence. The ancient olfactory signature, permeating the chamber's air, dense and faintly sharp to the senses, is the composite scent of oxidized leather bindings, resting beneath centuries of dust, manuscripts with exhausted spines, and the complex chemistry of archaic iron gall inks. Resting in the immediate corner stands a silver brazier, forged by a master silversmith and intricately engraved with delicate Rumi motifs. At the core of this brazier, the heavy, arboreal resin of slowly carbonizing aloeswood merges with a subtle, almost imperceptible distillation of rose oil, spiraling upward toward the elevated stone arches of the chamber. This localized thermal mass emanates a deliberate, focused warmth, standing in stark thermodynamic contrast to the pervasive coolness of the surrounding masonry. The ambient illumination remains profoundly subdued, maintaining a low, respectful luminescence that demands nothing of your ocular focus. Only the exhausted, flickering flames of soot-stained oil lamps, calibrated precisely to illuminate a singular, mother-of-pearl inlaid reading stand positioned before you, cast heavy, languid reflections that dance sluggishly across the gilded architectural ornamentation adorning the ceiling. Beneath your feet, the dense, tightly woven wool of a heavy, hierarchy carpet absorbs the acoustic footprint of every advancing step, amplifying the profound acoustic vacuum of the chamber. Tonight, shielded by the absolute architectural sovereignty of these impenetrable stone walls, we are not embarking upon a clamorous, kinetic pursuit of hidden antiquities. Rather, we seek a delicate fragment of cartographic brilliance, carefully concealed centuries ago within the mother-of-pearl incrustations of a hidden drawer inside that very reading stand, a map revealing a continental mass previously unrecorded by human geometry. We shall pursue the flawless mathematical coordinates of the Asian landmass and the uncharted oceanic expanses, guided solely by the immutable laws of geometry and absolute silence. This is no adrenaline-fueled expedition. It is the somber, academic excavation of lost epistemological data, awaiting its resurgence from centuries of dormancy, conducted with the rigorous solemnity of a university archive. Surrender your intellectual focus to the architectural gravity and academic austerity of this environment, for the intellectual paradigms concealed for hundreds of years are quietly waiting to be deciphered within this dense, luxurious, and profoundly knowledgeable silence. You are positioned within the renowned and melancholic climatological cycle of 18th century Istanbul, a meteorological phenomenon that surrenders the waters of the Bosphorus to a grey, churning turbulence. Beyond these walls blows the Lodos, a formidable wind system originating from the northern reaches of Africa, absorbing the saline humidity of the Mediterranean before descending upon the Sea of Marmara like an oppressive atmospheric blanket. This is no mere fluctuation in air currents. It is a dense meteorological mass characterized by a dramatic collapse in barometric pressure, structurally testing the cantilevered bay windows of wooden coastal mansions and inducing a profound lethargic weight upon the human cognitive state. The immense kinetic energy of this gale strikes the lead-clad domes of Topkapı Palace, structures that have defied centuries of elemental erosion. The heavy lead sheeting enveloping the palace roof, experiencing microscopic fluctuations as it expands under the diurnal sun and contracts within the nocturnal chill, now acts as a colossal acoustic dampener, absorbing the violent impacts of the Lodos. The malleable, dense and sonorous metallurgical composition of the lead filters the high-frequency shrieks of the exterior storm, transmitting into the interior only a muted, benign, and almost rhythmic hum. Beneath this atmospheric resonance, you stand at one of history's most flawlessly preserved thresholds, precisely at the coordinates where time itself undergoes a crystalline freeze. Your trajectory has long since detached from the complex, bureaucratic, and densely populated courtyards of the Biren, the architectural sector, representing the palace's conduit to the external world. You have forsaken the expansive, stone-paved administrative plazas, once reverberating with the cacophony of state affairs, the metallic clatter of janissary armaments, and the heavy hooves of diplomatic cavalcades. The moment you crossed the Baba Saadet, the gate of felicity, you executed far more than a mere spatial transition. You penetrated the Enderon, a highly restricted concentric zone where the fundamental physics of sound, light, and imperial authority undergo a total paradigm shift. Your physical form registers the architectural gravity of this crossing. The pavement beneath your feet transitions from the Biren's roughly hewn, carriage-worn porphyry and granite into something profoundly different. Smooth, pale white marble, extracted from the ancient quarries of the Marmara Islands, its veins seemingly etched by the hand of chronological time. As you navigate these monolithic slabs, every compression of your soft leather footwear against the stone forces a direct tactile engagement with millennia of geological memory. Proceeding beneath the vaulted porticos that circumscribe the Enderon courtyard, you observe that this complex functions not merely as an administrative epicenter, but as an academy where absolute silence is mandated as a rigorous intellectual discipline. Within these perimeters, vocalization, unless strictly dictated by operational necessity, constitutes a profound breach of protocol. Accompanied by this profound tranquility, you advance toward the sovereign core of the palace, the Has Oda, the privy chamber. The portal obstructing your path is no ordinary assemblage of timber. It is a monumental gateway, carved from dense ebony and walnut, suspended upon heavy bronze hinges, cast in the high-temperature metallurgical furnaces of the Topkapı. An exact chemical marriage of copper and tin that has resisted the corrosive, saline humidity of the Marmara for centuries. As your fingers make contact with the handle, the cold, frictionless, and authoritative texture, transferred from the bronze to your tactile receptors, murmurs the uncompromising severity of the realm that lies beyond. The precise moment you breach the threshold and enter the Has Oda, your acoustic and atmospheric tether to the exterior world is instantly, surgically severed. Your auditory faculties require several seconds to calibrate to the absolute, vacuum-sealed silence that suddenly engulfs you. The secret behind this acoustic isolation lies not merely in the spatial depth of the chamber, but in the complex chemistry of the massive stone masonry that surrounds you. These walls were not bound by conventional mortar. They were constructed utilizing Khorasan mortar, a highly sophisticated binder perfected by Ottoman architects, utilizing principles understood since Roman antiquity. Formulated with baked clay, specifically pulverized brick acting as a pozzolanic agent, combined with slaked lime, finely sifted sand, water, and even organic proteins such as egg whites to induce structural elasticity, this mortar has undergone a centuries-long chemical metamorphosis. Upon continuous exposure to atmospheric carbon dioxide, it precipitated calcium silicate hydrate crystals, effectively repetrifying into a monolithic, impermeable bedrock. The microscopic, porous topography embedded within these walls entraps and dampens even the lowest low-frequency vibrations of the external Lodos, bestowing upon the chamber the deafening, profound serenity characteristic of a deeply buried archival vault. This environment transcends the function of a sovereign bedchamber. It is the ultimate intellectual sanctuary of the empire. The Has Oda operates simultaneously as a sacred reliquary, safeguarding the most venerated artifacts of the Islamic world, enveloped in an immaterial armor of aloeswood incense, and as a private research institute where the Sultan applied his cognitive faculties to the administration of the realm, studying the rarest manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and cartography. Recessed within the architectural niches, you observe gilded leather bindings, astrolabes, and volumes of poetry, whose page edges bear the slight, unmistakable friction of centuries of scholarly perusal. Every object situated within this room is devoid of mere aesthetic superficiality. Each serves as a physical vessel for epistemological data. As you remain motionless upon the dense woolen matrix of the hierarchy carpet, you perceive the untamed kinetic energy of nature, relentlessly scourging the dark waters of the Bosphorus just beyond the masonry, solely as a faint, subterranean vibration permanently trapped within the stone. The interior atmosphere, meanwhile, envelops you like an invisible, impenetrable cuirass, interwoven with the heavy, authoritative aromas of aged parchment, oxidized beeswax seals, and the slowly combusting silver brazier. And as your visual receptors fully adapt to the low lumen illumination, you gradually begin to comprehend the incomprehensible mathematical discipline, the silent scream of geometry, encoded within the glazed tiles and timber that encase your periphery. As you stand at the periphery of the dignified thermal mass radiating from the silver brazier in the center of the chamber, your mind, entirely severed from the meteorological anarchy of the Lodos raging outside, begins to seek a new focal point within this vacuum-sealed silence. Once your ocular receptors have fully calibrated to the low-lumen environment, you realize that the massive stone masonry confining you within the Has Oda is not fundamentally bare. Rather, the surface is armored by one of the most intricate and arduous chemical transmutations in human history, the unparalleled quartz tiles of Iznik. These glazed panels are not mere ceramic fragments or superficial decorative elements. They represent a monumental database, a synthesis of terrestrial matter, extreme thermodynamics, and advanced mathematics, orchestrated with laboratory precision within the 16th century Ottoman ateliers. The profound secret encapsulated within these surfaces, currently gleaming faintly beneath the exhausted flames of the soot-stained oil lamps, lies not in standard clay, but in the crystalline structure of quartz. The matrix of these tiles contains an astonishing proportion of pure quartz, specifically silicon dioxide mineral, reaching concentrations of up to 85%, an anomaly that fundamentally supersedes all other global ceramic traditions. The endeavor of the master ceramists of Iznik to pulverize these extraordinarily resilient and nearly unworkable silica crystals within massive stone mills until they were reduced to microscopic particulates, and subsequently bind this dust with a specialized lead-tin alloy known as frit to achieve vitrification, constitutes an absolute triumph of materials engineering. Taking a deliberate step closer to the wall, closely observing the panels illuminated by the flickering light of the hearth, you can perceive that the renowned coral red pigment projects a microscopic, millimeter-scale topographical elevation across the tile's surface, distinctly raised above the surrounding colors. As you trace your fingertips across this frictionless, frigid, and vitreous plane, the subtle protuberance you detect is not merely a chromatic application. It is the physical manifestation of an extreme, elemental metamorphosis. This is the calcined residue of an exceptionally iron-rich geological specimen known as Armenian bole, fundamentally transformed within the absolute core of the kiln. To isolate this highly specific frequency of red, the master ceramists systematically managed the oxygen saturation within the furnaces, orchestrating a complex chemical reaction that spanned several continuous days under a punishing thermal load of 900 degrees Celsius. A thermodynamic crucible, where copper oxide mutated into cobalt blue, manganese transitioned into deep aubergine, and iron yielded that vibrant, unparalleled coral hue. The dense concentration of quartz dictates not only the visual aesthetics of the Has Oda, but directly governs the deafening acoustic properties of your immediate environment. Under standard physical conditions, highly vitrified and rigid surfaces are expected to reflect sound waves, inducing a resonant reverberation within a closed spatial volume. However, the overwhelming ratio of silica within the tile's matrix, combined with the microscopic porosity concealed beneath the lead-glazed stratum, acts to entrap kinetic vibrations through a mechanism akin to piezoelectric absorption. When ambient audio frequencies collide with the surface of this crystallized structure, they do not ricochet with sharp acoustic angles. Conversely, they are absorbed, dampened, and subjected to a profound acoustic decay by the chemical topography of the tile. It is precisely this physical phenomenon that ensures the silence within this chamber does not parallel the hollow, disruptive echoing of an empty subterranean cavern. Rather, it emulates the dense, saturated, and profoundly scholarly tranquility of a monumental library, packed end-to-end with heavy, bound volumes. Yet, as your visual focus retreats from the microscopic details of this chemical anomaly and shifts toward the macrostructural composition enveloping the entirety of the walls, you inevitably deduce that the primary cipher does not reside within the chromatic values or the material science, but within the cold, infallible mathematics operating beneath the linework. The intersecting trajectories of lapis lazuli, turquoise, and emerald green spanning the surface are not the arbitrary, free-flowing spirals of an artist's brush. They are rigorous geometric interlacements constructed under the absolute sovereignty of the compass and the straight edge, governed by a ruthlessly strict mathematical algorithm. As your cognition attempts to navigate a logical path through these labyrinthine patterns, it is inevitably drawn to the stellated polygons anchoring the composition. These are complex arrays of dodecagons and octagons, the absolute pinnacle of Islamic geometry, circumscribing one another through an impeccable sequence of tessellation protocols, leaving no spatial voids. The 8-pointed stars symbolize static equilibrium, the load-bearing structural nature of monumental architecture, and the 8 theoretical gates of paradise. Meanwhile, the 12-pointed stars, rotating around them in an asymmetrical optical illusion, represent cosmic order, the zodiacal belt, and the continuous astronomical progression of time. When you attempt to trace the origin coordinate of a single line, you observe it mutating into the vector of an adjacent star, devolving into a hexagon, passing beneath a solid band of turquoise, and ultimately returning to the absolute genesis of the composition, albeit on a completely altered dimensional plane. This is not a superficial optical diversion. It is the theoretical concept of the eternal cycle, the infinite loop inherent in Islamic philosophy, translated onto a two-dimensional plane via advanced analytical geometry. There is no absolute center within these panels, much like a cosmos expanding beyond the constraints of its designated framework. The vectors do not terminate at the physical boundaries of the tile, but are intentionally left unresolved, implying an infinite continuation into the unseen void residing behind the masonry. The flawless, mechanical, and structurally frigid rhythm of this geometry systematically disengages the human mind from the chaotic entanglements of mundane thought, compelling it to submit to the meditative, hypnotic equilibrium of pure mathematics. While observing the play of the oil lamps against this vitreous surface, with every refraction of light, your mind registers what feels like an incredibly distant, almost imperceptibly weak reverberation of a reed flute. a crystalline, microscopic resonance carried by the wind from a lodge far beyond the dark, churning waters of the Bosphorus. It is impossible to quantify the duration of your cognitive entrapment within this mathematical labyrinth, for this specific geometry was engineered with the precise intent to the perception of time, to render thoughts heavily weighted, and to exhaust the intellect with the rigor of a laboratory procedure, drifting deliberately away from this algorithm of infinity across the walls. Your gaze slowly descends toward the mother-of-pearl inlaid reading stand, resting silently upon the heavy hierarchy carpet. The centuries-old ciphers etched into the walls have methodically prepared your intellect for the primary enigma. The cartographic silence, inscribed upon gazelle parchment, that has been lying dormant for centuries within the hidden drawer of that very stand. Your visual focus gradually descends from the incomprehensible mathematical labyrinth of the Iznik tiles, drifting downward to settle upon the mother-of-pearl inlaid reading stand, resting with profound modesty, yet absolute authority, upon the dense hierarchy carpet. This stand is no mere utilitarian furniture. It is an absolute marvel of architectural woodwork, where the most iridescent layers of marine shells have been friction-fitted into the dense, heavily veined matrix of walnut wood without the introduction of a single drop of adhesive, an assembly requiring the precision of a surgical instrument. Reaching toward the lateral surface of the stand, your fingertips locate a minuscule wooden latch ingeniously camouflaged among the mother-of-pearl incrustations, actuating a drawer that has remained hermetically sealed for centuries. The resulting dry, resonant, and agonizingly slow friction of wood against wood echoes within the vacuum-sealed silence of the chamber, resonating as though it were the very acoustic manifestation of time, pivoting upon its own axis. As the drawer achieves maximum extension, a thick, tightly coiled cylinder of material is revealed, entirely insulated from the corrosive degradation of the centuries. Upon tactile contact with this cylinder, you register that the structural integrity beneath your fingers does not belong to standard paper or commonplace vellum. This is gazelle parchment, painstakingly selected in the early 16th century and chemically engineered to defy the physical ravages of time. Due to the extreme density and elasticity of its collagen fibers, gazelle hide possesses an unparalleled resistance to mechanical tearing, maintaining a cellular cohesion capable of enduring the saline saturation of the oceans and the suffocating humidity of naval quarters. Yet, the element that renders this specific parchment structurally immortal is the zenith of Ottoman paper conditioning, the discipline of aha. The flawless, frictionless surface you perceive as you carefully unroll the document is the result of a profound biochemical treatment. Egg whites, their molecular bonds intentionally broken down over months of stagnation, were homogenized with pure alum and wheat starch, then meticulously integrated into the pores of the hide. Following the application of this protein-based glaze, the surface was relentlessly polished with a smooth agate stone for consecutive days. This exhaustive mechanical compression reduces the friction coefficient of a pen against the parchment to near zero, preventing capillary ink dispersion and granting the hide its heavy, rigid, and unbreakable morphology. The thick, resonant rustle you hear as the roll fully expands is not the trivial sound of an object. It is the auditory signature of a 500-year-old chemical synthesis. Focusing upon the intricate linework inscribed into the dermal surface, you discern the secret behind the profound matte opacity of the black ink. This pigmentation is the direct result of soot ink, the purest carbon particulates, systematically harvested from the elevated domes of monumental mosques through specialized architectural ventilation, then relentlessly pulverized with gum arabic and iron gall extract for months on end. This compound does not merely rest upon the proteinaceous aha glaze. The tannic acids within the gallnut powder initiate a slow cross-linking polymerization with the amino acids of the parchment, effectively weaving those jet-black coordinates directly into the genetic matrix of the hide. As your eyes navigate these microscopic vectors, you can almost perceive emanating from the deep recesses of the chamber. The exceedingly faint, rhythmic click of a reed pen being deliberately submerged into and withdrawn from a silk-lined inkwell. An acoustic phantom persisting from centuries past. This cartographic specimen entirely rejects the rigid, orthogonal grid systems of modern cartography. For what you are currently holding is a monumental portolan chart, synthesized in 1513 by Piri Reis, within a dimly lit study in Gallipoli, mathematically interpolating data from nearly 20 antique maps and the currently lost navigational charts of Christopher Columbus. Emblazoned across the surface are polycentric windroses, painstakingly illuminated with gold leaf and deep crimson pigments, each denoting precise compass orientations. Erupting from the epicenters of these roses and enveloping the maritime expanses in a massive geometrical web are the complex rhumb lines, the absolute mathematical proof of 16th century naval technology and trigonometric calculation manifested upon parchment. By aligning a vessel's trajectory parallel to a specific vector within this network, a master navigator could traverse the oceanic expanse without ever referencing the astronomical coordinates of the stars. The undulating topography of the Iberian Peninsula, the western continental shelf of Africa, and situated at the extreme left of the composition, the eastern coastlines of South America, a massive terra incognita for the European continent of that era, are drafted with an incomprehensible topographical precision. The shaded relief of the Andes Mountains, the anomalous biological specimens wandering the primordial jungles of the New World, and the detailed illustrations of galleons with mainsails billowing under the Lodos wind, superimposed upon the windroses, represent the zenith when navigational genius transmutes into high art. Along the margins, extensive annotations rendered in the elegant Nazi script using iron oxide red ink function as academic prefaces to Piri Reis's monumental treatise, the Kitab al-Bahriya. These structural notations delineate the thermodynamic behavior of oceanic currents, the anthropological characteristics of indigenous populations, and the precise angular declination of celestial bodies during the equinoxes, all recorded with ruthless academic objectivity. However, observing the macro structure of this colossal document, you inevitably identify a profoundly dramatic, jagged, and violently severed edge, descending vertically down the absolute center of the right hemisphere. The infallible geometry of the rhumb lines and the mathematical distribution of the windroses prove, beyond any margin of academic doubt, that this chart is merely the surviving left quadrant of a massive ellipse designed to encompass the entirety of the terrestrial globe. The most oppressive mystery, compounding the gravitational weight of the Has Oda, is precisely the lost Asia and Oceania, situated just beyond that ragged perimeter. It is an epistemological impossibility that Piri Reis neglected to draft the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the deep, spice-laden topographies of the Asian continent. Where, then, is that colossal missing hemisphere? The exhaustive cataloguing processes within the massive archives of Topkapı Palace, which house hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, yield only a deafening silence regarding the fate of this missing half. Certain academic paradigms hypothesize that the Sultan personally excised this highly strategic Asian fragment to secure within his private campaign chest for Eastern conquests. Conversely, opposing factions argue that this gazelle parchment simply fell victim to the entropic decay of time and the internal political vacuums of the imperial court. As you hold the surviving hemisphere of a 5-century-old world within your hands, the absolute absence of the remaining continent exponentially densifies the already oppressive intellectual weight contained within the chamber. The colossal volumetric mass of the unknown, of that which has been structurally erased, materializes within the protein-scented texture of the gazelle hide, the permanent resolve of the carbon ink, and the slow downward descent of the aloeswood smoke from the silver brazier as it settles upon the parchment. Chronological time has decelerated. History, along with the mathematical coordinates of those missing continents, and invisible oceans, has retreated into its secure, infinite dormancy among the towering shelves of the Imperial Archive. While your cognitive faculties remain suspended within the enigmatic coordinates drafted upon Piri Reis's gazelle parchment, drifting through the conceptual void of vanished continents and invisible oceans, the meteorological anarchy raging beyond the massive, lead-clad fenestrations of the Has Oda systematically begins to mutate, rapidly exhausting its kinetic energy. The oppressive and melancholic Lodos, which for hours has mercilessly battered the dark waters of the Bosphorus and fatigued the branches of the centennial plane trees, surrenders its dominion to the far more resolute, motionless, and frigid silence of the advancing night. The high-frequency, whistling lamentations generated as the gale impacted the lead roofing panels have completely dissolved, neutralized by the monumental acoustic dampening of the thick stone masonry and the renowned Khorasan mortar, where pulverized brick remains permanently sealed by proteinaceous binders. As the external tempest subsides and the natural world reclaims its thermodynamic equilibrium, the heavy, archival silence within the chamber crystallizes into a tangible, physical mass, descending upon your shoulders with profound gravitational weight. Chronological time does not progress along a linear vector within this spatial volume. Rather, mirroring the perception of the eternal cycle embedded within the Iznik tiles upon the walls, it folds in upon itself, decelerating, densifying, and ultimately grinding to a near-absolute halt. The architects of this dense, luxurious, and absolute tranquility are not merely the massive marble blocks constituting the walls, nor the geometric kundakari joinery interlocking without metallic fasteners upon the cabinet doors. The true custodians who have perpetuated this stillness as an uncompromising discipline for centuries are the Has Oda pages, individuals who have navigated the most elite, rigorous intellectual conditioning of the Enderun Academy to attain access to this very epicenter of the palace and the empire. They are by no means conventional armed sentinels. They are the sworn conservators of the Sultan's most guarded intellectual reflections, the invaluable sacred relics of the Islamic paradigm, and the exceedingly rare cartographic ciphers currently resting before you. During their nocturnal vigils, they perambulate, wearing specialized footwear constructed from compressed felt, engineering a friction coefficient with the masonry floor that approaches absolute zero. Even the textile composition of their burimchuk garments, a sophisticated interweaving of silk and cotton, is manufactured through specialized looming techniques designed to eliminate any microscopic acoustic friction against the ambient air during kinetic movement. They glide through the obscured corners of this colossal, dimly lit hall as immaterial shadows, generating 0 decibels of sound. Their very respiratory rhythms have been perfectly synchronized with the barometric cadence of the chamber. For introducing unnecessary auditory stimuli or displacing an object with audible force within this volume constitutes far more than a mere breach of imperial protocol. It represents an irreversible desecration of the solemn dormancy of the knowledge saturated deep within the masonry. Their silent, phantom-like presence is an invisible, yet absolute, unshakable authority, elevating the structural integrity of this environment to its absolute zenith. As the midnight hours recede into antiquity, the flickering choreographic illumination of the chamber is systematically terminated with the identical, flawless discipline, the soot-stained flames of the oil lamps, which for hours have danced languidly across the gold-leafed roomy motifs adorning the ceiling, are now on the verge of concluding their cellular functions. Within the silver brazier situated in the corner, the smouldering coals, which have permeated the volume with the heavy, slightly astringent aroma of combusting aloeswood and essential rose oil, have entered the terminal phase of their chemical reaction. The slow, persistent, and silent interaction between the carbon matrix and the atmospheric oxygen systematically yields to a cotton-like, immaculate stratum of white ash. Directly beneath this pale residue, the exceedingly fine, microscopic crackle emanating from the final fragments of crimson embers, still pulsating like a dying cardiovascular system due to oxygen deprivation, is not a disruptive noise breaching the silence of the Has Oda. Rather, it is the precise acoustic detail that hermetically seals it. A Has Oda attendant emerges silently from the encroaching darkness, utilizing brass shears to sever, with profound surgical precision, the carbonized apex of the cotton wick upon the final candle, cast from pure beeswax. This deliberate procedure ensures that instead of suffocating the combustion through abrupt, brute force, the flame is permitted to extinguish itself through natural thermodynamic exhaustion. The microscopic whisper, generated by the warm vapor of vaporized beeswax merging with the atmosphere as the trembling flame expels its final breath, audible only through extreme auditory concentration, is the sound of the chamber's final optical tether being gently severed. Darkness, within the parameters of this chamber, is never categorized as a deficiency, a state of nothingness, or a malevolent variable. Conversely, it is the most fundamental, noble physical prerequisite necessary for knowledge to macerate within its own essence, and for parchment and ink to achieve structural equilibrium. The monumental, chronologically paralyzing nature of archives and libraries activates precisely during these moments, when photon emission is entirely eliminated. When the lamps are extinguished, the gazelle parchment maps within the reading stand, the frictionless pages conditioned with ahar and sealed by agate stone, and the vocabulary inscribed centuries ago with sooting transition into a state of photochemical dormancy. Liberated from the corrosive, molecular degrading photons of ambient light, the cellulose, the dermal collagen, and the carbon matrix descend into a flawless cellular stasis within the immutable, stabilized coolness and precisely calibrated microscopic humidity maintained by the Khorasan mortar. This is the absolute tranquility, not merely of antiquarian objects, but of the cognitive labor, the exhaustive intellectual shifts, the astronomical computations, and the philosophical inquiries of geniuses who existed centuries ago. Libraries and historical archives are, in essence, colossal and dignified chronological capsules that systematically reject the ruthless, unidirectional forward momentum of time, cryogenically freezing the past and embedding it permanently within the present coordinate. As you stand motionless in the epicenter of this absolute pitch-black environment, situated immediately adjacent to the mother-of-pearl inlaid reading stand, you are not merely inspecting an architectural masterpiece. You are occupying the identical, silent, densely saturated void shared with the astronomers, the cartographers, the geometry masters, and the sovereign monarchs of the 16th century. The monumental density of information they deposited onto those egg-white glazed parchments centuries ago now settles upon your shoulders, descending upon your cognition within this darkness, with an invisible, yet entirely irresistible force, operating precisely like the immutable laws of gravity. Adrenaline has entirely surrendered its physiological domain to the dense, meditative equilibrium of academic data. There remains no further enigma necessitating empirical investigation, no quartz chemistry to be tested within the thermodynamic crucible of the kilns, no geometric cipher demanding analytical resolution, and no cartographic coordinate requiring navigation across the open maritime expanses. Every micro-detail, every verified historical absolute, has retreated to its designated quadrant, returning to the secure parameters of the obscured archive, its eternal locus of preservation. Your cognitive faculties have reached the absolute zenith of purity and saturation within this academic, data-heavy, and rhythmically monotonous expedition. You are now under the structural protection of these colossal stone fortifications, the mother-of-pearl inlaid reading stands, and the gazelle parchment topographies. History is not merely a chronology necessitating memorization, but a reinforced sanctuary wherein the intellect may find absolute equilibrium. As the photon emissions terminate, the immense gravitational mass of knowledge deposits you into this noble, impenetrable stillness. Within the heart of Topkapı, all matter occupies its rightful coordinate, as do you.